Can almost anyone be successful with AI? That depends. Can almost anyone learn to code? Wait, don't answer that yet, because I don't want to get into a debate about coding skills. Not yet. What I'd rather talk about are the soft skills you need to be successful with AI, or in spite of it, and how they have little to do with writing code. I was a part of one of the first VC-backed natural language generation, or Gen AI, successes, Automated Insights, starting back in 2010. I invented the part of our platform and ran the side of the house that brought the AI skills that weren't code specific. Now, to be transparent, I am a developer, but I was tasked with hiring a small army of people who could provide the knowledge to be able to turn data into words that had more meaning than just looking at the data itself. In other words, I had to find people who could not just use AI, but could succeed with AI. And back in 2010, when NLG was a new thing, even before it had a name, I had no idea what those necessary skills might be, and it took a lot of trial and error to figure it out. I'm a big proponent of no-code and low-code, and one of the arguments I make to support the no-code movement, and the one that gets me into trouble with real coders, is that all of us, myself included, are just manipulating someone else's lower-level code. I mean, it's 2024. Very few of us are writing low-level machine language. We're super users, really super users. Oh, so can anyone learn to code? Sure. Depends on how deep you want to get into the syntax. But what separates great coders from terrible coders is a certain set of skills that have nothing to do with memorizing syntax. What makes great code elegant, reusable, and efficient are the soft skills that develop elegant, reusable, and efficient solutions that beg to be brought into reality by writing great code. Now, over the last few years, no-code and low-code have evolved into something that looks a lot like a visual replacement for textual coding syntax. And since it continues to evolve at a breakneck pace, it's quickly catching up to that textual syntax. So will no-code ever replace real code? Who cares? Let's instead talk about the underlying skills you need to be great at no-code, real code, or artificial intelligence. Okay, so let's state the obvious for the purists. You still need code to implement the solutions these skills produce, whether it's code you learn on your own at a lower level or no code you implement at a higher level. Now, if great code comes from a great solution comes from great problem solving. But I'm not going to be lazy and leave it at that. I solve 100 problems a day, and very few of them have to do with coding. Not zero, but very few. So here are the problem-solving skills you need to develop the great solutions that become the great code that leads to successful AI. Understand how data impacts the problem. This seems painfully simple, but there are a number of questions that are easy to answer without having to understand why, and you need to understand why. What's the problem you're trying to solve, along with its adjacent problems? Who else is trying to solve those problems, and how? Exactly how much of those problems does your data solve, and how well? And how does your company sell and profit from that solution? Automated Insights started exclusively in the sports industry. My first lesson was that people who understood exactly how data solved problems in the sports business were far more likely to succeed than either inexperienced data scientists or non-technical sports industry veterans. Application of business theory, product theory, and customer theory. What happens when you put a bunch of machine learning specialists, data scientists, and technologists in a room? It's not a joke, we did it. Turns out the answer is absolutely nothing. Now, I'm being somewhat facetious. Once we had some traction in the market, I put together an innovation team to think about the science of AI and where we should head next. A lot of crazy ideas came out of that room. A lot of fun, crazy, brilliant ideas. But none of them were rooted in business, and none of them could effectively be MVP'd, let alone fully realized. Now look, science is awesome, but what you build in a lab usually stays in the lab without a lot of heavy lifting. Instead, we relied on people who understood how to build amazing products, could bring them to market fast, and wanted to make customers successful. Creativity focus and the application of ideas. Everyone thinks they're creative. Everyone thinks they have amazing ideas. And you know what? They're right. But that doesn't mean anything if the creativity isn't focused and the ideas aren't applied. And usually, in fact almost always, the only way to get better at either of those skills is by trial and failure. We rolled out a few versions of our product at Automated Insights before we found the application of our idea that stuck. And today, in fact, I'm on the third iteration of one of my more recent projects after the first two Same creative foundation, same idea, but executed poorly, failed. Pattern recognition and trend spotting. If there's a reason I'd call myself a good coder or good with AI, this would be it. Now we're in the populist stage of Gen AI, where we're seeing a lot of chat GPT style data in the wild that's been generated just for the sake of regurgitation of data. The real skills aren't in spitting data back as words, and that's something I forbid at Automated Insights. Instead, the hard part of what we did was figuring out meaningful trends, deltas, and milestones within that data. And while any budding data scientist can write formulas to detect or mimic that behavior, being able to visualize patterns, realize trends, and find milestones that have meaning, that's a soft skill that's essential in producing useful AI output. Developing state machines. This is the most developer-like skill you must have. The best AI use cases don't just tell you what happened, they tell you what should happen next. In traditional coding, you wrangle this with a state machine, represented as a flowchart style diagram that captures the if this, then that nature of what computers do or how they think. Now, this was the very foundation of our NLG platform, and by the time we were done, we had a multidimensional array of these state machines that made the decisions that generated useful, insightful, and valuable content. So if you can visualize, document, and implement state machines, you're well on your way to figuring out how to make the multitude of complex and related decisions that our human brains are making perpetually. And that's what AI is really doing underneath all that code. I talk a lot about automated insights in some of these, especially the ones that have to do with AI, because there's a lot of tech under the hood and a lot of lessons learned. I'll go back to my very first hire at Automated Insights because that was my hardest. I spent weeks doing it, and I actually traveled up and down the East Coast to a couple different places to uncover some serious talent in the sports industry. But I ended up finding the right person right in our own backyard, waiting tables at a chain restaurant. Now, it wasn't as random as all that. This guy was super intelligent. He knew the hell out of sports. He went to school for it, but he was sort of like the Jonah Hill character in Moneyball. His talents were being wasted. Now, the sports vets I had been talking to, they didn't work for one reason or another. They either didn't understand the technology, or they didn't believe the technology had a place in sports, or a combination of those two things. One thing I want to talk to you is state machines and flowcharts, if this, then that. One of the reasons you need those is you have to have the parameters set, you have to have your garden walled, and you have to have the walls constructed so that your AI doesn't get out of control. Trying to be all things to all people out of the box with AI is the biggest mistake that we saw people make very early. So if there's one piece of advice about AI that I want you to take away from this video, it's don't start with AI and figure out what you want to do. Start with what you want to do and figure out how to use AI to do it. Hey, if you got something out of this video, I encourage you and I implore you to try Teaching Startup. Teaching Startup provides access to actionable, insightful, and honest advice for entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders at all experience levels, regardless of their connections or resources. We do this by providing access to over 700 questions from hundreds of members, answers from hand-picked, experienced serial entrepreneurs like myself. We have advice posts, we have member polls, and you get new Q&A each week and an exclusive newsletter. So thank you. And of course, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, whatever you want to do. But if you really want to support what I'm doing here, you can help me help you by becoming a member at Teaching Startup. I appreciate you. Now go do great things.